Hello everyone, my name is Peter Blundell and I'm here with my colleague and friend Sheila Haugh, and today this is a therapist reflecting video where we're going to be having a bit of a discussion around unconditional positive regard. We're not really sure where it's going to go, but Sheila, do you want to tell people why we decided to talk about this today?
Yes, I've been thinking about unconditional positive regard. I realise in quite a lot of different guises over the last couple of years. And for one reason or another, Peter and I were talking, and I came to understand this possibility of this forum, and just thought it would be really nice to spend a little time, me sort of like banging on about my ideas about it, but actually having a discussion with somebody about it rather than, I can sit on my own and bang on about this till the cows come home or pontificate. So when Peter was talking about this forum, we said, well, why don't we have a chat about it? I would really, really welcome that. Helps my thinking. I know you're interested in it, Peter, so it just seemed like a nice idea.
Yeah, I'm quite excited to see where it goes and what it is that we talk about.
Yes, because we're going quite free flowing here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Which is exciting but quite nerve-wracking as well.
I can start us off though with the well, I don't know if it's the abstract or the proposal or just a thought for me really, is about this idea, which when we started talking, I was saying to you that this sense that this condition, one of the 6 conditions of Roger's work and one of the 5 therapist conditions, is basically now has been reduced to an acronym. UPR. I mean, we were talking just before we started. What do we call this discussion? Simply because I don't want us to call it. I don't even want us to call it unconditional positive regard anymore, which is partly what we're going to be talking about. So it's the idea of trying to reclaim what the acronym UPR is supposed to stand for, but whether we've lost the feeling in it is really where this has started, isn't it?
Yeah, so that idea that it's kind of thrown out there, oh, UPR, we offer UPR, do all therapists offer UPR, but actually, what does that actually mean in practice? And is it actually a one thing that we all do, or is that something different that's created with each person that we meet?
And then that whole area of, is whatever we're talking about today even possible? Because some people have suggested it's not possible. And whether that, for me, my question about that is if we really have a clarity about what we mean, then I'm happy to discuss that. But quite often I feel like people are saying, oh, UPR is not possible because, I just don't like some people. I mean, I'm exaggerating for clarity, but that's in essence what we're doing. So that's how we've got here. So the next bit would be the difference. The difference, and I rely on Roger's 1959 paper quite a bit in terms of a clarity of how he described person-centered client, as it was called. He called it in that paper, client-centered psychotherapy. But that paper is a little bit it's quite a cold paper. He was asked to write it in a particular format for a particular very prestigious publication at the time. So it's in a certain format. And when you read other bits of Roger's work, I think what we might be discussing today is absolutely, it's all in his work already. So I don't think we're talking about anything new. I do think we might be talking about something that was lost and trying to bring it back in. And for me, that's the words around love, compassion, kindness, caring, that someone knows that they matter to me in some way. They're the words that are being concertinaed into UPR. And is that a big enough acronym for all of that?
I'm thinking, and I suppose I'm wondering, actually, does this often happen with all acronyms, no matter what you're using them for? Is this quick offhand idea of representing something, but actually isn't something lost in that abbreviation? I mean, maybe even in the word, the 3 words itself, but then to reduce it down to 3 letters, as if we're all talking about the same thing.
Oh, you're so right, actually. And isn't that interesting? Because there are certain acronyms that I see have developed over the years in writing, and I react. So capital C, small o, capital W for conditions of worth. And nobody thinks twice. And I'm like, no, it's not an acronym. I've not linked that. Yes, you're right. And not only with us, of course. It's the same. It's the same.
Yeah.
So there is something. Language is so important, and I know, this is around for us all at the moment, isn't it? About how we use language. Are we just being woke, for example? 20 years ago, people were being accused of just being politically correct. Now it's that, or you're not woke enough. And all the bits of truth in all that for me is these words do matter. Really do matter, not least when I think about compassion and warmth. There's something there also about thinking about where the definition of what constitutes warmth and compassion comes from. So we move into a little bit of how psychology as most of us know it, is such a white Western description of what is normal, what is healthy, what is what's preferred, and this concept falls into that as well, can fall into that trap just as easily. I don't know if you can sort of like join in with that one, Peter, I guess.
No, yes, I suppose what I was, maybe going off in a little bit of a different angle, but I was thinking about putting the word unconditional in front of compassionate. Unconditional compassion, unconditional compassion, or maybe might be the phrase I was thinking of when you were talking. And I was thinking, is that the same? Is that different from unconditional positive regard? Is it an element of unconditional positive regard?
I did get into a linguistic tangle recently, that when I was looking at the research around, I keep calling it this concept because I don't want to call it UPR, but saying warmth, love, and compassion, warmth and understanding. There's a song in that somewhere as well.
There's also probably another acronym we could create.
Yes, unconditional UCR. But in a lot of the research, in most of the research recently, the word unconditional has been dropped, and they just talk about positive regard. And at first, I was sort of a bit railing against that. It's like, no, the unconditionality is really, really important. But actually, I think, and I'm checking out if this would be your understanding, if it's called positive regard, that means positive regard for everything all the time. So you don't need to have the unconditional in there, do you?
I suppose it's whether you think about it as an overarching, or whether it is at the moment I have positive regard for you, but that's not always the case. Is it something that we have, or something that is there?
Oh, that's very profound, Peter.
It just came out. It wasn't thought through that way.
I have, or something that's there. Something that's it's very much. I mean, Leata wrote about unconditionality, being for the unconditionality part was for the deeper core of the person and what they could become. Which neatly, I don't mean this pejoratively, but that neatly sidesteps the worry about, behaviour, all those sorts of things. It's about the potentiality.
So the positive regard is for all of those aspects of self that are there that have not been seen or shown.
Yes, or have not emerged,
or not emerged.
Yeah, something. Yeah. And I've sometimes thought about it in terms that basically, I mean, it's another. All these words can be very trite if you're not careful with them. But like that absolute profound respect for this other human being trying to make their way in this world, for me, is about that. That's the unconditional. I mean, I'm thinking now as I say that, I'm not sure I can even separate out unconditional positive regard. It's just it's a warmth and compassion.
I mean, I'm glad you said that, because as you were talking about like that word respect, I couldn't get there in terms of the phrase. I just kept feeling the feeling of the warmth and the, I suppose you mentioned it before, love.
Yes.
For someone. An embodied feeling.
And some of these words are words that somewhere along the line got expunged from therapy. They were dangerous. They were, in some approaches, would be described as over-identification, or what's the other word when you get overwhelmed by someone? Something like that. You get, it's like it gets too close to you. And I think people sometimes have used the example, Rogers, according to the biography, Rogers, he worked with a client that he found very, very challenging, and got so close to them that one afternoon, emotionally and therapeutically, and one afternoon just decided he couldn't do it anymore, and handed over to John Schlein, saying, I can't manage, that afternoon. There's a word in psychodynamic word. Oh God. Anyway, it's gone. It'll come. And I realise as we're talking, I'm slowing down and starting to sink into it. And I think that's probably I think that's what I've caught while I've been sort of trying to look around and researching UPR and tables and stuff like that. And so I get caught up a little bit in the sort of the research protocols around for these things, which in some ways I know are necessary, but it becomes so heady. And then to actually say, do you know what? I really care about my clients. It's like, oh, be careful. You'll identify, you'll get swept away. And we feel that fear. I mean, if we're told I think for some of us, I shouldn't say everybody. I shouldn't say it, but I do. That if we're told we're going to get swept away, if we're told we're over-identifying, if we're told it's wrong to feel this, then we start to think it is wrong. And then those moments of when I think, am I going to get compassion fatigue? I mean, that is the other side. If I care like this.
I suppose I was wondering, where am I going to get swept away to?
So for you, there's no sense of getting swept away somewhere?
I mean, the sense of swept away for me sounds and feels like this uncontrollable way of going somewhere that I shouldn't be going.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm thinking about the feeling, there's a stillness to it. For me.
Yeah.
And I come back to the idea of, I don't know if we have discussed this, but the idea of presence, like it's very much attached to that for me. Part of my presence and stillness as I'm with somebody.
Yes.
So I don't think I've felt ever a risk of being swept away.
No, I felt in danger of my stuff. You know, I was talking the other day with some people about that grief that sometimes comes up, and it's like the wobbling of my chin or that, and it's so clearly mine that is coming up for me as someone's talking. And I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but in some grief moments, strange phrase, but in some moments, that sense of I start crying, I will never ever stop. And I know this isn't true now. Your body physically can't cry forever. But that moment, and maybe that's the sort of moment people are thinking about. But I don't think that's actually, as you're talking, I don't think that's about compassion. Actually, that's something else I'm getting caught up in, rather than my feeling toward this person.
And that, I have had that feeling, and I can imagine that sweeping me away. But I almost feel that might sweep me away from, not away from my compassion, but away from my stillness in the moment with the client.
Yeah. Away from my focus in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Into my own frame of reference.
Yes, exactly. So sort of that's got nothing to do with this bit.
Well, by exploring it and knowing it helps.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. I also, the other thing, as you know, I live in Czechia, and it's a Central Eastern European country. It's very like ours, but the point of saying all that is the different ways that compassion or caring is shown. So I think these. I just think sometimes I feel like these are so trite, but they're so meaningful for me. For me, one of the ways of showing something like that I have compassion for. However you walk through the door, it's like that's okay with me. And one of my ways, it's like, because I guess partly because I'm a Brit, even though I offer a cup of tea. Would you like? And I know that some people still can be quite surprised at a therapist offering. I don't actually offer tea usually in Prague. It's a coffee. Some people. I won't go into the minutiae of this, but that sort of sense of welcoming, I think, is part of this. It's about kindness and warmth.
Is it indicating? Well, I think it's indicating I care about you.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in you being comfortable whilst you're here.
Yeah. There's a really nice paper from somebody who is very, I think he's Kleinian or very Winnicottian, very psychoanalytical in my view, a guy called Brett Haugh. Not so long ago, it could be 10 years ago actually, recently, in the living past, he did a paper called, it was a short paper called something like Don't Spill Your Red Wine on My Carpet. And basically his scenario was, I can't remember if it was real or not. I think it might have been real. Or he was, imagine, anyway, point being, people are invited to this really nice party, this soiree, supper that people have. I've never been to a soiree myself, but it sounds nice. And the nice food is out, and we're all very civilized, and everybody's chatting. And you come in, and you get offered a nice red wine or a white wine. I don't think beer was on the agenda in this scenario. I think I'm catching some maybe class issues here, but the point being that the guests, they get their white wine and all the rest of it, and they're given the red wine, and it's like, be careful not to drop any red wine on the carpet, this beautiful white carpet, which is new. And that's been the instruction, be careful not to drop any red wine. And just the knock-on effects of that, because then people are starting to be a bit nervous about dropping their wine, so they're not relaxed. So the question being, why would you invite someone into your home and give them red wine and tell them not to drop it? So the warmth and he was basically, the point he was making was, how as therapists do we invite people into what is our, and all the power that's involved in that? How do we invite people into our space, be it in an office that we're hired, or in our home office, or in our home, in somewhere in our home? How do we invite people in a way that is warm and welcoming and creates a space where somebody feels accepted? So me and a glass of wine, it's not my environment so much, but then I had to be careful. I feel like tend towards a slightly clumsy person. I would have one glass of wine and probably go home, because I'd be too scared of dropping red wine on the carpet.
That makes me think about the conditions, the 6 necessary and sufficient conditions, and in that example, how the conditions were created to make it not a safe space.
Yeah.
And that by putting that in, the person was trying to make it a safe space for them, the person who owned the property and was having the party.
Yes.
But it wasn't then necessarily a safe space for the guests who were being served the wine.
Oh, Peter, that really takes me off on that. So is I don't know what I don't when a new client comes in, if you're someone, I pose this to us and others, when somebody comes in and you've got your contract or your agreements, or they've had to sign, or they've got to say, yes, I've read it on the internet. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I don't do it. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it, but actually, what's the welcome notice on the door? My first experience, and I've said in previous places, I think I said it in the last time we met for one of these sorts of things, my life achievement one, was about my experience with psychodynamic, and how I loved the theory, and it all fell apart in the 3rd semester in terms of practice. And the part of that was, and it's going, well, it's 20 years ago. Geez, I was going, it's not going back that far. But we had to go to the analyst's home I think we were in a group of 8 for supervision. And it was up in Hampstead. It was in the same road as where Freud lived. It's a very, very wealthy part of that part of London. And I was a bit overawed by that. And I got to the house and I knocked on the door and I said, I've come for the supervision. And the guy said, oh, you need to go around the side, to the office around the side. And I just felt so many things in that moment. When you have these moments where it'll take me a day to tell you what I thought in that moment. But it was something about, I was not good enough to go into the house. Now, I know this all fits within the paradigms, the different paradigms. It makes sense within psychoanalysis, for example. But I really just went into a bit of a place of, oh, okay, I can't, I'm not good enough to go around here. And I had to walk around and go into this side office. And that, for me, I guess that's why Brett Carr's paper, thinking about it now, so stuck with me, was that was not a welcoming, that was not a welcome mat. That reminded me of the old thing of it years ago. I think some people still have it. The tradesman's entrance. Do you remember that? But it was called the therapist entrance, but still, you weren't good enough. No, I get it. I mean, if that put 8 people tramping through your house might not be the ideal, actually, but it still didn't feel welcoming. People on your carpet with red wine, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes me think about the physical space and different therapists that I've visited. And for me, when I'm talking to students, I talk about how the therapeutic relationship is starting the
Yes.
moment there is any form of
Yes.
of contact. And
Yeah.
two situations come to mind. One time when I was going to see a therapist, and I appreciate, no judgment really against the therapist, but the kids' bikes were kind of strewn in the hallway, and I had to climb over things to kind of get into the building. And I appreciate, they would have had a busy day and not managed to move it or whatever, but it's for the first time seeing somebody, being a bit nervous, not sure what they're going to be like, what this is going to be like, to navigate through that.
Yes.
Was just added like another layer for me as a client.
It can swing too far the other way, you're saying, in some way, actually. Yeah.
Well, I suppose what I'm thinking about is the conditions are important in creating a safe and relaxed and welcoming space. Like, it can be unwelcoming for people for lots of different reasons, by putting in rigid contractual boundaries from the offset, or by not having anything there.
I mean, I know we're talking about compassion and warmth, positive regard, but that brings me to that place where you can't. I don't think it works talking about them completely separate, of course, because there, for me, you're talking about empathy as well. It's like, actually, how is someone going to feel climbing over those bikes? Now, it might have been absolutely unavoidable. So this is, I'm with you. It's not a criticism.
No.
It's an observation that actually that did impact you in terms of that relationship. And who knows how it would have been different if those bikes hadn't been there.
And that begins as soon as we start to have any kind of contact with a client.
But Bozarth had quite a nice flow. And it was about, for Bozarth, what he, in his writings, what he described as UPR, when he was writing theoretically. But so let's say warmth and compassion, where the curative, that's the curative factor in person-centered therapy for him. And empathy is the way it is communicate, or empathic responses, or Barbara Bodley's empathic following responses. That's the way it's communicated by the congruent therapist. And there's something I quite like about that idea, although as well it separates things out rather a lot. But there's something that appeals to me in that. I think it's the logic that if we're arguing, or our hypothesis is that it's conditions of worth that cause our griefs, and they are caused because we get conditional love, then it sort of makes a logical sense that if you're getting an unconditional love, then we'll get better. I mean, that's the so something appeals to me, although maybe it's a bit too simple.
I suppose what I'm thinking about is that unconditional love or compassion creates a safe space for someone to explore all those other things that are maybe more difficult to talk about. And so that's where the healing bit comes in for me, is by creating that space, there's room for those other things to be explored.
There's us. I mean, it's really simple, isn't it? If I'm loved for who I am, then the bits of me that I don't love can still come here
and be loved.
Oh God, this sounds nice, doesn't it?
It does. And Sheila, we're like coming up to half an hour, which is what we agreed time we were going to talk for.
Okay.
But I also feel like we could have carried on with this discussion for a lot longer.
But for me, it's a start, of course, because there's something, because there's another bit about how the next bit for me would be, how do we risk this love? There feels like there's a risk somewhere in this. I haven't quite caught. I can catch some of my own fear. I think I can catch some of our fear out, my fear out there. But so I don't know if it's all about fear, but something, there's a next bit. Here it is. We seem to be agreeing, and I hazard more people agree. Let's talk about love. That you and I are both Liverpudlians. We've got a history of all you need is love, and it's whatever, it's true. And I remember the loving awareness campaign on the continent at one point. So something about what's dangerous about it. Starting to that.
I wonder whether, again, because we started off this discussion kind of saying, do we actually know what unconditional positive regard is? Now I'm thinking, do we know what love is?
Yes.
And yes. By that I mean, I was having this conversation with some students yesterday. I can be offering or providing or having a sense of love in a session with a client, but it may be a certain type of love. And the danger element, I think, is when people misconstrue maybe what I'm saying now with romantic sexual
love.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's when people feel more comfortable with the words compassion, say, for example. But for me, they're connected in some way.
I'm tempted to go and have a look at some of the work. I don't know if there's anything specific, but Peter Schmidt on what does compassion mean? Where did that come from? The wording come from. I think there's a next bit to this. Maybe I hadn't realised there might be
part two.
Yeah, part two. Yeah. Nice one.
Thanks, Sheila. We'll leave it there for today.
Yeah. Okay.
We'd love to hear what everyone thinks in the comments. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.